Hello and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Doghouse, Separation Anxiety Explained. I am Ness Jones. I am in Australia from Separation Anxiety in Dogs Decoded. And with me today is...
I am Stacey Bell from Focused Fun in the US. Today we are going to talk about tough cases, when to stick with them, when to cut your losses and manage, kind of how do we know when we've met that point where we should give up. And honestly, bottom line is this is going to be different for everybody. But we'll talk through some of the things that you should consider.
Yes, indeed.
So this is actually a listener question that we've decided to do a full podcast on. So if you are a listener and you have a question that you would like us to do a deep dive on, let Ness or I know, and we'd be happy to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. So what makes a separation anxiety case tougher, more difficult to resolve? What have your experiences been surrounding that, Ness?
I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge that if you've got a dog that you've been doing a lot of training with and you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, don't give up necessarily. There might be a reason, and finding out what that reason is. But we do understand that it's tough, and that we are definitely acknowledging that it's not easy, and that we're here to support you guys. But sometimes there are things that maybe we haven't tried that we could possibly attempt and see if we get any resolution before that. So. Which might be.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that is a true thing. Even when separation anxiety or home alone training seems to be smooth sailing, it's still a lot because during that time, you're still having to manage absences. And, for some people, that means relying on others, which can feel heavy. A lot of people don't like to reach out for help. That can feel difficult for a lot of people. So it is tough. And when things aren't going smoothly, it's, even though that's kind of a normal part of the process, like we talked about last time, I think, when we were talking about blips and regressions and all that, even though that's a normal part of the process, it's so discouraging. It's really discouraging.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah.
Okay.
So first, it would be helpful, of course, to know why the training is not progressing. So discovering that is going to help resolve it. But sometimes we can't discover it. But what are some of the reasons that there might be? Could be something medical. So I have had a client, I think I've mentioned this in the past, that has had allergies and training just went backwards. As soon as those allergies hit, it went backwards, and we had to delve into that and get, the vet prescribed allergy things, and they went away and the dog was fine after that. But there can be medical issues. Gastro is a big one too.
Gastro is huge.
Yeah, but pain, anything related to pain.
Skin stuff as well, which can kind of be in the allergy realm, but also can be outside the allergy realm. But skin stuff can be really big.
Yeah. I thought you said Insta.
No.
And I'm like,
not
Insta. Okay.
What are you saying? Is this a new thing? No, skin stuff. And I've had clients with chronic ear infections urinary tract infections, bladder infections. I'm trying to think of what else. But yes, anything medical. And, we've talked about this before, but just to reiterate, if you think that your dog is in pain and you're seeing some observable behavior, it's a really great idea to get video of that and bring it with you to the vet, because a lot of times in the vet office, your dog will tense up and it's harder for the vet to diagnose that pain. And so whatever you are seeing at home that's got your kind of alarm bells going off, it's a good idea for you to try to get that on footage. Of course, you're not going to try to put your dog in a bad position to get the footage, but if your dog's already, maybe slow to get up or limping a little bit or whatever, just try to get that on video. So you can bring that to your vet to give them another tool to help diagnose your dog.
Yeah, that's really important. I think I had a dachshund client and I could clearly see there was something going on with its left front leg. She could not get a vet to diagnose that. I don't remember if she ended up taking a video in or not, but I was watching her videos that she was sending me to review, and I could clearly see there was something going on there in the videos.
Yeah. I've had that too, where I'm watching the videos and I'm like, does your dog have a history of this? Or, and it's interesting. It can be really hard to diagnose.
Sorry, can I mention age?
Yeah, go.
So age can be a factor that your training might be progressing, and it could be a young dog that, especially with the COVID lockdowns, never learnt to be home alone and is struggling because they've got lots of energy and then maybe not getting enough exercise or enrichment, and they don't know where to stick it. So they act out when you walk out the door. So that often we can see improvement as the dog is getting older and more confident and more independent because of that confidence. So we might see that. So sometimes, we still want to do the training, but if we can acknowledge that the dog maybe just needs some more time because of that age thing, but also geriatric dogs. So, if they're suffering from some sort of geriatric dementia, that might play a part. And again, that's a vet visit.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. And for those young guys, like we've talked about, increasing the mental and physical enrichment, as well as some social stuff and all of that. Revisit the podcast that we've done on enrichment type stuff, because that'll really help those young guys that are not necessarily displaying anxiety, but not comfortable with you leaving.
Yeah.
Another one that I see tougher as far as cases that are a bit tougher to resolve is when the dog has multiple behavioral issues. And so what I mean by that is dogs that also have sound sensitivity or are also struggling with big feelings while on leash, or stranger danger, or aggression, or, things like that, where there are multiple behavioral expressions of anxiety related stuff, then I find that those cases are trickier to resolve. Not that they can't be resolved, but they take kind of more work usually.
Yeah.
And also dogs that have kind of just a generalized anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
So not necessarily like towards anything, but like maybe new things, or, just everything in their environment.
The world.
They're just kind of always triggered.
Yeah. And I mean, we can work on that too. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely, with all of this stuff, it's not that a case can't be resolved. It's just trickier to resolve the case. And so.
Yeah. So often if we resolve one thing, I guess the point of what we're trying to say is, if you can focus in on one thing and get that sorted, it might flow on to your separation anxiety training.
Yes. And so, do you have any other areas that you've noticed in your clients that lead to like a tougher resolution for you typically, or?
I can't think of any off the top of my head. I know age, young dogs is definitely, they just seem harder to get across the line at times.
I did notice another kind of category that can make things really tough. And that is if your dog is the kind of dog, and this is true for a lot of dogs in general, but and maybe to a higher degree for some dogs that struggle with separation anxiety, is if your dog's very routine oriented and you have a lot of routine changes in your life, that can make cases tough to make progress on, because it could be like, oh, we got up to 20 minutes and then you go away for 3 days on a work trip and now your dog, can't do anything, and then so you start over and you build up and then you go on another work trip. And then, so those things can be difficult. Like I said, difficult, but work throughable, which is our new word for today, work throughable. So I think that can be a really tough one. And depending on what the routine change is, sometimes you can kind of go into the routine change a little more gently, and that can really help the dog.
Yeah, for sure. And having guests in the house as well, that can make it harder.
Yes. One more that I think can be tough, which I kind of like hesitate to even put it here, is when people aren't managing absences. And why I say I hesitate to put it here is because then you're not really doing the training right properly, because you're exposing your dog to over threshold experiences. But if you find that there are a lot of situations where you're having to leave your dog in, to go over threshold from leaving them longer than they're comfortable with, then that negatively affects training and can really make resolution tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Stacey, what happens though if you're doing everything right, if you're managing your absences, you're trying to do the training, but you're not making any progress? What can we do to try and get that dog across the line?
I've got tips. Okay. Tip number 1 is, I don't know what my first tip is. That's why I'm like, I think my first tip would be like, if you're working through home alone training by yourself, or if you're doing like a group training sort of thing, I would suggest that you reach out to a specialist in separation anxiety and have at least, like, even if you're not signing up for a package, but at least have a consultation with them. Because a lot of times when I see people in this category, it's like, oh, if we just tweak these couple of things, it makes all the difference, right? And so I've seen that a lot. And if you're not working with anybody at all, one of the most recurring comments that I get for feedback from people is, oh my gosh, I feel so hopeful now. Like, so it's not only about getting your dog across the finish line, it's like feeling good about the process, which I think is huge, because if you're working through the process and it's feeling kind of overwhelming and you're not sure if you're doing it right and your dog isn't responding, that feels really crummy. It doesn't feel good at all. And so, anyway, so that's one of my tips. Do you have a tip?
Touching on that, I think we see things that maybe you don't. And also, I think we can really push I can't think of the right word. You might have to make one up for me. But we can push the ideology is not the right word, but anyway, the thought pattern that we must set our dogs up for success. And that could be something as simple as maybe you're doing the training at the wrong time. So maybe you're not achieving what your goals are because you're training at a time when the dog is not settled, or the dog is expecting something, or that they're not as relaxed as they could be, and so therefore we're not setting the dog up for success, and therefore the training might stall for something as simple as that. What's tip number 2?
I was going to let you do a tip number 2.
Oh,
do you have a tip number 2?
Well, I might get them in the wrong order. That's what I'm a bit worried about.
It doesn't need to be in an order. It's just like,
oh, okay,
these are some tips.
Okay, well, that would be one of them, setting the dog up for success by training at a time when at its optimum. But maybe obviously investigating, if there's something underlying medical cause. So a visit to the vet is important. if you're doing the training and it's going backwards, then ideally we want to know why. And if it's medical, then that's going to require going to the vets and trying to determine
right.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah. And just something that you said made a thought come to my mind. And that thought is that if you're doing the training and seeing your dog going backwards, another possible cause is that you're missing some subtle signs of anxiety, and your dog is getting sensitized to the process of you leaving, right? So that's another good reason to reach out to somebody who has a little bit of experience, who can watch your dog's body language and point out some of those signs that you might be missing.
The flip side of that is that perhaps you're so worried about your dog going over threshold that you're seeing things that aren't there. So in other words, you feel like your training's not going forward because your dog does something, and you're seeing it as a sign of anxiety when perhaps it's not. So you're going, oh, that was a terrible session, when in fact it might not have been. And
that's an excellent point.
You might be overreading, and then you're going, oh, the dog's regressing, but in fact,
that's a really common one with following to the door. Is that, your dog will follow to the door, and you're like, oh my goodness, that means that my dog is feeling anxious. And it could be that your dog is feeling anxious, but it also could be that your dog is following you to the door because doors are exciting. And they want to know where you're going. Like my dog follows me to the door when I go to the door, too, and he doesn't have separation related behavior. So that's a really good one to point out, Ness. Way to go.
Thanks, Stacey.
You're welcome. What's another one? Oh, the other one that I had on my list was talking to your vet about anti-anxiety medication or behavioral medication. If your dog is already on medication, it's always good to go back to your vet to have a med review to make sure they're on the right medication, the right dose, or to see if there's maybe another medication that can support your dog in addition to the medication they're on already. Or if they need to do a wholesale switch up. So your vet would be the one to guide you through that process.
Touching on that, so a lot of people don't want to go to the vets for anxiety medication because they are worried it's going to turn their dog into a zombie or make them sleepy or change their personality, all those things. If that happens, it shouldn't, and it's the wrong medication for your dog. But a lot of people want to try all the natural things first before they go down that road. So unfortunately, anecdotally, at the very least, I think most of those natural remedies they might help a little bit, but maybe not as much as we would like to see to get your dog across the line. And then the next thing is, do you get Zycline over there? Yeah, so that's like an over-the-counter sort of thing. I don't know, anecdotally, if you heard, I don't think many of my clients have said they've used it and it's helped much, but it can maybe add a little bit of extra comfort for the dog, I guess. Have you heard much about it?
No, some vets will encourage people to try that first before medication. I think my biggest thing with it is that it is still expensive. It's not any cheaper than prescription medications, and it doesn't have like all the testing. And it's not tried and true. We don't see the same effects, the same level of the effects that we see from prescription medications. So to me, I'm kind of biased against them because I haven't seen them help my clients much.
Yeah. So and just to reiterate what Stacey said is, if your dog is put onto medication and you're not seeing any change or difference or any positive signs, because let's not forget that it facilitates the training, it's not a magic cure,
right?
Then it could be the wrong dose or it could be the wrong medication. So you have to keep an open dialogue with your vet.
Yes.
So that
yes,
they
you
can
do.
tweak stuff if needs be.
Yes. Yes. Because it is very individual, right? Each dog, just like people with medications as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just keep an eye on any big life changes that might impact the dog. So if you feel like your training is stalled, is there something else going on in its life that could be impacting your dog? Whether that is maybe you take your dog to doggy daycare and they just don't like it there.
Mm-hmm.
Or
maybe you take your dog to doggy daycare and their favorite person has left, or the routine has totally changed at doggy daycare, and that's throwing them off.
Yeah, could be any sort of number of things. So good to know.
Mm-hmm. For those dogs that have kind of a more than separation related behavior, so if they have other behavioral struggles, I completely get it that you might only have the headspace to work on one behavioral struggle at a time. But it is important to try to at least put some management in place surrounding those other behavioral issues so that your dog isn't experiencing the stress and anxiety from those, because that stress and anxiety will impact how well your dog can handle home alone sessions. Yeah. So they're like, while you might want to put those on the back burner, and a lot of times you can put them on the back burner, but you also will want to put some management in place. Yeah.
And I think we need to sort of talk about trigger stacking or layering, whatever you want to call it. So even though whatever else is going on in their life isn't necessarily related to separation anxiety, it can definitely impact it. So if they had a bad day at doggy daycare, if they went to the dog park and got attacked, if they've got those behavioral issues that you're talking about, Stacey, all that stuff can, or maybe somebody left home, or, there's guests in the house or kids, or who knows, could be any number of things, but they can stack up and make it harder and harder for your dog. So when you go your training and do their home alone time, that they just can't cope because of all these other things going on in their lives.
Right.
So that's why if you can't resolve those things, then management is another option.
So those are some characteristics of cases that might be more likely to have a bumpier road or a more difficult resolution, and some ways to kind of circumvent the difficulties. As far as when to give up, that's like a really tough question, because that is such an individual decision. I think for me, one of the things when you're in the place where you're feeling like this is getting nowhere, I've tried all the things and I'm still not making progress with my dog, and you're feeling that frustration, I do suggest that you do take a break, right? Because you're just, things aren't moving forward for your dog. You're feeling frustrated. It's not good for anybody.
No.
So a break is good. The big thing there is that you're going to want to make sure you manage absences, right? So you're still, respecting that rule of not leaving your dog over threshold. So if you find yourself where you're thinking of giving up, I don't know if maybe my dog is one of the small percentage of cases that we just can't help resolve, then for if you're feeling like that might be you, or if you're working with a trainer and the trainer feels like that might be you, then I would recommend taking a break, making sure that you build your village, that you have a healthy group of people that your dog feels comfortable with, so that you can live your life and do fun stuff that your dog might not be able to be included with, and see how that feels. Does total management feel okay to you? For some people, that's a huge relief. And for other people, it's like, I thought it was going to be a relief, but it isn't. Like, I feel like I'm having to ask people for a lot of help, and I don't like that. So then it might give you like a fresh boost for
trying again,
wanting to try training again, or trying again, maybe meeting with a vet who's got more knowledge than your current vet about behavioral medication, or, you know, working one-on-one with a trainer when you haven't done that. But what would you say on that, Ness? Any wise words?
It's tough. And I think while building a village is a great idea, definitely having a break. But if you're still feeling like a prisoner in your own home, then I would maybe reach out to a vet. Certainly, you know, maybe go to a vet behaviorist if needs be. If you're already doing that and you feel like you're already getting all that, the medication is on point, definitely that break might just be the thing. Maybe you just need to reset yourself and your dog.
Because we do see that sometimes. We do see that somebody might take a break, maybe even like a month off, and then come back to training, and, you know, it goes really smoothly. So that would be another, I guess, that would go under the tips section, is take a longer break and see if that helps reset things.
And watch yourself too. Like, so obviously the training is a big thing, and if you're stressed about its outcome, it's going to also stress your dog out too. So you have to also, maybe that break is just what you need to get your enthusiasm back. Because if you've been doing it for a long time and you don't feel like you're making any progress, then you will get to the point where you're like, I can't do this, I'm too stressed, I'm too anxious, it's doing my head in, and that will flow on to your dog. So you probably will see a decrease, or you could potentially see a decrease. So maybe that break's just going to be the thing you need to boost your enthusiasm.
Yeah, but it could be that you take the break and you say, you know what, managing absences is a whole heck of a lot less stressful than training when we're not making progress, and you stick with that. And there's absolutely no shame in that either.
No, not at all.
You know, just the big thing that I just want to make sure is that your dog is not experiencing, you know, panic attacks every time you leave because you decide you don't want to do the training anymore. Just reiterating that whether or not you do the training or feel like your case is unresolvable. Yeah. That's not right. Yeah. Okay. You still have to support your dog in that way, as far as making sure that they're not experiencing that.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So Stacey, do you think there's ever a time just to say, that's it, I'm done?
I do. I mean, I do think there are some dogs that, you know, we've done all the things. I did actually have a client who had so many health issues, so many variations of anxiety, like all of the ones: noise sensitive, leash reactivity, stranger danger, generalized anxiety. I mean, just it all, like GI issues, other medical issues, ear infections, UTIs.
Wow.
All of, like, just so many things. And she was a young dog too. And she lived in a busy city, like right downtown in a busy city. And so a lot of it was very difficult to manage. Right.
Gosh.
Okay. And she was working with a really awesome vet behaviorist. And we actually stopped separation anxiety training so that she could work with all of the other things for a while, the health issues, the noise phobia, all of the other things, because it was really impacting our ability to get traction. And so she ended up moving outside the city. And like, now she's finally, it's been like, I'm going to say like a year and a half. She's been working with this really awesome team. I mean, they're really top notch. And just unable to get traction on anything, unable to find a good medication regimen for her, like just really just stuck. and she moved away from the city, and now everything's just clicking into place. So it was just like they couldn't get traction. There was just too much stimulation for her there, too many triggers.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really interesting case that I was thinking, because I had worked with her for several months before we referred to the vet behaviorist. And so I was kind of leaning towards this case is unresolvable, like she's just, but then how do you sit with that? Because the dog had so many welfare issues too, right? Like it wasn't just like she can't be left alone, but otherwise is fine. But she had so many welfare issues and so many health and behavioral, it was just really tough. So I was really glad to hear that moving had made a big change for her in the positive direction. So they still have work to do before we pick up the separation related behavior stuff again, but that's really awesome.
That's great.
So sometimes it can feel hopeless, and then there's a change that changes the course a bit that, what was your question before I got off on that tangent?
I asked if do you feel there's a time to not ever, to say that's it, I'm not doing anymore. I'm not going to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you've done kind of the things that we talked about, and I'm talking about like really giving it a go, and you're not
just try it
progress.
once.
If you're really giving things a go, and
I feel, just touching on that, I know a lot of people say, I tried meds and they didn't work. And you're like, well, what did you try? they had Prozac for 3 weeks and that was it. And you're like, but did you, 3 weeks, A, isn't long enough. B, did you keep an eye out? Did you talk to your vets? Did you try something, blah, 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 blah. So,
So it's about, I do think there are some dogs that we can't help. And sometimes it's that they have these really complex cases, and sometimes it seems like the dog's fine other than the separation related behaviors, but we just can't get traction with it despite all of the stuff that all of the interventions that we've been doing. And so for those people, if they are, if that's you and you're able to manage absences, then I would do that. I would do that over, doing all the things and then doing all the things again, and then maybe resorting to some other outdated ideas for, well, maybe this will work kind of thing, grasping at straws.
Yeah, for sure.
How about you? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. It's a tough one. I mean, I hate to feel that we have to give up, if you know what I mean. Like, I
hear you. Yeah.
But at the same time, sometimes we just have to recognize, and especially as you say, if there's a dog that has got generalized anxiety and all this other stuff going on. For me, I certainly would not continue if it was an older dog, like if it was 14 years old, say, and, I wouldn't bother. I really wouldn't. I mean, and, once we've sorted out all the stuff, obviously, tried it, and if it wasn't progressing, then I would say fine. If it's a young dog, though, then I'm conflicted because
harder.
It's a long time to have to manage absences, and I would feel like I would want to keep trying and just find what works for that dog.
Yep. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. Remember to do all the subscribing and rating and reviewing. We really appreciate when you do that.
We do.
And to reach out if you do have topics that you would like us to unpack.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next time. I am Stacey Bell from Focus Fun in the U.S.
And I'm Ness Jones from Separation Anxiety in Dogs Decoded in Australia. And you have been listening to Tales from the Doghouse, Separation Anxiety Explained. See you next time.
Bye.